Channel 2 and the American River Conservancy present the series A Place Called Wakamatsu Farm.
Nestled in the Sierra Nevada foothills, Wakamatsu Farm is located in Placerville within a region now called Gold Hill. This scenic 272-acre farm is just 2.5 miles from Coloma, where California gold was discovered in the mid-1800s. Summers in this part of the United States are hot, and rain rarely falls during the dry season. The first European settlers in the area were miners who probably thought very little about local farming. That is, until they became hungry. By then, wise and successful farmers began growing their own wealth by feeding the mining camps. From the 1850s through 1870s, grand construction projects in the county created miles of canals and ditches to supply water for gold mining. Water from these canals also irrigated farmland, as it still does today. More control over water marked the beginning of extensive crop farming, especially fruit orchards of peaches, pears, apples, and plums. Many small farms still remain in fertile El Dorado County, especially in nearby Apple Hill. Beginning in 1869, the place, now called Wakamatsu Farm, was the site of the first colony of Japanese immigrants. The colonists brought many experimental crops from Japan. Records indicate these early pioneers probably planted the first rice in California at Wakamatsu Farm. Their efforts marked the beginning of the Japanese influence on farming in California, a legacy that continues today. Farming families like the Grainers and Veerkamps also built their own legacies on this property, where farming remains a way of life. In 2010, a nonprofit land trust named American River Conservancy bought Wakamatsu Farm from the Veerkamp family. One of the Conservancy's goals for the farm is to continue its farming traditions while maintaining the cultural and natural resources on the property. The Conservancy's effort preserves wetlands, oak woodlands, and riparian areas for habitat and wildlife. The Conservancy leases acreage to independent farming operations. Freehand Farm provides raw pastured Jersey milk for members of their small herd share. They have also produced grass-fed lamb, grass-fed beef, pastured pork and eggs, and farm-grown wool. They practice rotational grazing and process their whole milk at the farm. In 2019, Fog Dog Farm began growing nutrient-dense vegetables year-round. They also offer wood-fired brick oven bread. They practice crop rotation using no-till and minimal soil disturbance. Both farms practice regenerative farming that increases soil productivity, nutrient cycling, and water retention, along with many other benefits to the environment and the wildlife that flourishes at Wakamatsu Farm.
So we run an operation where we use grazing to benefit the land, and the main way you can do that, or one of the main ways you can do that, is by extending the growing season of the grassland that you're on. There's this really cool thing that happens when you take an animal, a sheep or a cow, or in a wildlife situation, it could be a deer, an elk, a buffalo, bison. The animal takes a bite off that plant, and usually in nature, ideally you'd have predator pressure that would move the animals off of that area before it would come back and bite the plant again. In our case, we are the predators, so we're using electric netting to move our animals to a fresh piece of ground frequently. And then that plant has an opportunity to grow back to its original size or bigger. And when it is getting ready to do that, it's taking carbon out of the air, out of the surrounding air, and it's turning it into simple sugars, and then it's taking those simple sugars and sending them through its roots into the soil, and it's feeding the soil life like bacteria, fungi, all kinds of stuff. And in exchange, that fungi, bacteria, it is returning nutrients. It's taking nutrients out of the soil that the plant would not be able to access on its own, and it's feeding them to the plant through its roots. And it's storing that carbon. So if this grass were to just grow once, in the growing season and never get grazed, that cycle would only happen once. If you are using intensively managed grazing or well-managed grazing, you can often have that cycle occur like 2, sometimes 3. In the Midwest, maybe you're doing it all summer. You're getting like 4 or 5 times of that cycle happening and storing more carbon, versus just letting the grass grow and not be grazed, where it's going to do it once and then be done for the year. And in the dry season, our goals are a little different. We are not just focusing on that carbon cycle. We're focusing on a lot of different factors, but out here we're prepping this area to get overseeded with kind of a more diverse blend of plants to increase soil health. So we're taking the sheep through and just having them eat and trample this dry stuff to get the soil a little more open so that we can get that seed to soil contact when we plant. Another benefit of this is that in California, the land was fire adapted for thousands and thousands of years. In many areas, you cannot necessarily do controlled burns safely now, but you can use the sheep in the same way that the fire would have controlled that fuel load on the land. So we have the benefit of, when we're running sheep, to decrease fuel load. Instead of releasing all that carbon, the smoke from the fire into the atmosphere, it's just getting turned into little pellets of manure that then, as soon as the rains come and the soil wakes up, those are going to become nutrients for the plant life and the soil life. So it's a win-win.
We went from a history of farming that was measured in thousands of years, like Sumer, right? The ancient agricultural river flooding agricultures would last thousands of years in the same place, to hundreds of years, to now it's a question whether or not a farm, any of the farms that we know by name, whether or not they're going to be farming next year is a question. Our present is kind of an anomaly in our framing of conservation as people outside of the landscape, but that the bridge to sustainability in the future is finding a way for us to be in the picture that's not extractive. I worked on a 15-acre organic mixed vegetable farm, tractor scale, as an employee for a couple of years, and then met Kristen. She wanted to start her own farm. I figured that I had a unique resume of having experience with a lot of startup farms, and we started Fog Dog in 2016. And that idea of I want to be at the center of the community providing food for it. That seems like an admirable thing.
Come and experience this place called Wakamatsu Farm, where sustainable agriculture, natural resources, cultural history are all still alive.